Prove it, President Obama says to Speaker John Boehner in regards to the House vote for a clean CR. Prove it, conservatives say to President Obama that Obamacare really is going to work one day, from IT concerns to actual bureaucratic concerns. We'll talk about that next on Get Right with Lenny McAllister, starting right
now. Get Right with Lenny McAllister.
Hit me!
The way we help bring back America and we build the bridges and bring people together is by making sure we hold everybody accountable in a 360 fashion.
So let me close with this. Yes, there is a change that we can believe in, but it will never come from a politician or a government program.
We cannot find physical sanity here in the land of Lincoln, from Carbondale to Elgin, that we can collectively continue to tolerate insanity found on the streets of South Chicago and East St. Louis, Illinois.
We got to move away from the American Idol soundbite nature of politics and back to the American statesman of humble servant leadership that we used to see in politics.
It is time to roll out the era of the new, educated, engaged, and energized American citizen.
I go do the jail ministry. I speak to the kids in the streets. So I'm never going to lay down being a conservative just as much as I'll never lay down being a proud African American.
Feel like a black republic, money I got coming in. Can't turn my back on the hood, I got love for them. Can't clean my act good, too much thugging them.
This is an interesting game of chicken that we're seeing in Washington, isn't it? This game of prove it, one side to the other, and nobody wants to budge, and everybody actually does have something to prove. We'll talk about that today. Hey, what's going on? It's Get Right with Lenny McAllister. It's me, Lenny McAllister. It's you joining me on Facebook, on Twitter, online. Appreciating you following my articles on Global Grind, following me in TV, following me here at the podcast, where we have wonderful, short, but meaningful conversations. Again, thank you very much. You know where to find me on Twitter if you want to feedback anything to me, if you will. I made feedback a noun to a verb. You gotta love how I do that. And I'm starting off fresh and early, making that happen for you right here on Get Right with Lenny McAllister. Find me for the feedback. Twitter, LennyMcAllister. If you go to tinyurl/Lenny page, you can put your comments on Facebook as well. Again, I appreciate you joining me here, and I'm going to dive right in. I know yesterday was more along the lines of why can't we get along? But I'm not going to switch it back to Washington and day, what is this? We're basically at a week. We've literally gone a week with a government shutdown. And, you know, it's funny because they say that all these things are going to happen and then they start bringing people back to work, which I'm happy for. I don't want anybody missing a paycheck. You know, there's been a lot of people that were hit hard in this recession. I was one of them. I understand this dynamic. So it's good that people can get back to work. But with this government shutdown, you have basically federal employees that are being, in essence, they're basically the hostage in this. The American people are the hostage in this, and you have two sides trying to prove their points. And I think it's very, very interesting. So we'll start out with President Obama. He's going to Speaker Boehner in saying, prove it. Because Boehner's saying, we don't have the votes to pass a clean CR. So we have to negotiate something on the debt ceiling, on the budget, and on Obamacare. That's the only way. Did I call it Obamacare? I kind of did. I'm sorry. And we'll get to why I kind of muttered that word like that. Obamacare. Anywho. And so President Obama goes, hey, prove to us that you don't have the votes. Because what we're hearing is that there are 200 Democrats and we can find 17 Republicans. They don't want to come out in public until they have to actually pass a vote. It's kind of like what Bart Stupak did with Obamacare in 2010. He didn't want to vote for it because he was a conservative Democrat up in, I believe it was Michigan. I know it's one of the two states with the peninsulas, and I do believe in the Northwest, not Northwest, in the Midwest, and I do believe it was Michigan that Bart Stupak was from because he's no longer in Congress. But he was holding out until he was absolutely certain that the votes were there. And then he still needed a little bit more from the president before he and his small merry men of conservative Democrats finally came over and gave the Democrats the vote they needed to pass the Affordable Care Act in 2010 without any Republicans. So you see Republicans doing the same exact thing now, saying, listen, if we're going to be primaried and roasted by the conservative movement and possibly lose our congressional career, we need to make sure that we are part of 217 to pass this. And because there's, I believe, 3 to 4 Republican congressmen that will not go on record yet, there's this fuzzy number where we're at 210, 212, maybe 217, maybe 218, maybe 220. We don't know. Because we also know in these scenarios that once the momentum starts going, you will find other people getting on board. People that will say, no, I'm going to vote against this. Once they see that it may pass, they want to be on, quote unquote, the right side of history. I've never understood that term, by the way. What is the right side of history? I thought that was standing for your convictions and being able to explain that to your grandchildren one day. I thought that was the right side of history. I thought that's how you created history versus, well, I want to be popular. That's what that is. So there are congressmen that want to be on the right side of history, i.e. they want to be popular with their buddies in Congress, or more importantly, with donors that can get them reelected next year. So they're going to wait out to make sure that all the votes are there. Well, Boehner saying, I don't have the votes. President Obama saying, prove it, put it to a vote. We're hearing that you have the votes. Put it to a vote. Now, I think, and I'm going to get to the other side of this prove it coin, which is, I think, is a very interesting dynamic going on. I think that President Obama is playing this right. Because I do think, genuinely, that if you put it to a vote, you will have 200 Democrats that will vote for the clean CR. And I think you'll find 20 Republicans that will go with this, because I think you will find a core 12 to 14 or so that have all gone on record with the media, without giving names, but people basically guessing and speculating who these folks will be. Folks that have already said, yes, we'll do this. And I think there's probably another 5 to 10 that will do it once they see that those Republicans that said that they're going to do it are actually committed to the point of putting their name on the line with an actual vote. I think from there, once that final whipping process goes into place where the majority whip, Kevin McCarthy from California, goes around and tries to find the votes, I think that finally what will transpire is that you will see that it could pass. And I think that President Obama is playing it well to push Boehner to a vote. Now, do I think it's going to happen without negotiations, considering we're approaching the debt ceiling crisis and everything else that's going on? No, it's not going to happen today. I would seriously doubt that it's going to happen on October 8th. I do think, however, that if Boehner can say, okay, Mr. President, I think we're at 215, but in order to get these last 5 people to move, you're going to have to give something up now. Not after we reopen the government. Now. Because we can't just pass a CR. We have to address the debt ceiling. We have to address spending. We have to address the national debt. And we have to pass an actual budget so that we're actually passing appropriation bills and government is running the way it's supposed to run, not with these continuing resolutions that we've been seeing for the last several years, and not the process that we've been seeing from the Senate since Harry Reid became the majority leader over there. He is basically in the Bart Stupak position from 2010. And I think that, one, President Obama recognizes that. So I think that's the reason why he's trying to push back on Boehner and get him to prove that he doesn't have the votes. And again, let me know what you think on Twitter, on Facebook. You know where to find me. But I think that Boehner has to almost take that Stupak approach and say, listen, I'm probably going to get skewered for this anyway. So it's been a nice run. But while I'm here, I'm going to get the absolute most out of this deal. And then I'm going to sunset from being Speaker of the House after 2014. He doesn't win again. He wasn't supposed to win again after 2012, but he did. Remember, there was talk of the head of the RNC going. There was talk of the Speaker of the House going and having changes in leadership. And both of them stayed. So we won't really get into the grassroots and into the political mechanism today. But in regards to Boehner, I think that was the last straw for him. That was the last hurrah, if you will. This was the last chance for him to show that he's going to be what the conservative aspect of the Republican Party in Congress wants from the Speaker of the House. And I think that he's not going to be there after 2014, so he might as well get the best deal he possibly can now. So he needs it on the debt ceiling. He needs something on Obamacare. We'll see how that goes. And he has some leverage there, even though closing the government is not that leverage. And he needs something in regards to a budget in spending, not clean CR, keep it going as is. He needs to get all three, and I think that he can do that, but he can't give in to President Obama with the prove it. And so we'll be able to see who wins that battle based on when that vote comes. Now, part of the reason why, and I'll get to this on the other side of this coin now, part of the reason why you're probably not going to see a vote today or even a vote tomorrow. I think that you may see a vote next week. I don't think they want to get into T-minus 7 days with this debt ceiling situation. And that's where you start going as of Thursday the 10th. You start getting a T-minus 7 days. That's when I think the markets will flip out. That's when I think the global economy and the major players within the global economy are going to start really getting on Americans' back and saying, hey, Congress, what the heck are you doing down there over in Washington? Get it together. We've had enough of this in 2008. You already threw the global economy off, and if you do it again, the dollar will not be the foundation, which would be a huge problem for us as a nation. You are not going to be the economy we basically hitch our boats to. We can't do this anymore, which, again, would be a major situation for our country. We already don't have jobs and don't have the investment we need here and can't create private sector wealth for more Americans the way we need to. The last thing we need to do is stop being global leaders economically, or the global leader economically, I should say, because we'll still be a global leader, but we need to be the global leader. And another crisis makes global leaders, other than the United States, think differently about letting us continue to be in this position. And you could sit there and say, well, they can't force us out. Yeah, they kind of can. Remember, the Chinese were trying to do it, manipulating their currency. There was talk about moving the foundation of the global economy away from the dollar after 2011. We don't want those conversations again. So they're going to get on our case. So I think that we'll have a vote before T-minus 7 days, which really is Thursday the 10th. But this is what Speaker Boehner is going to have to go back to the Democrats with in regards to one of the three things he's looking for. He's looking for debt ceiling relief, i.e., let's look at the spending before we raise that debt ceiling. B, he's looking at a real budget that he needs, not just a clean CR or a continuing CR just to reopen the government. And C, he needs something on Obamacare. And the leverage that he has when he goes to the Democrats and to President Obama and says, prove it, he's looking at how this Obamacare is being rolled out. Now, you can call it a train wreck all you want until you can prove that there are actually trains coming off the rails. Otherwise, it's just theory. It's no longer theory, folks. And any Democrat that's telling me, well, you could have expected or should have expected or must have expected these type of problems. No, you do not. I have seen private sector IT professionals and IT organizations, big organizations with huge rollouts, not have these type of problems, not have these types of issues, not on this type of scale. I mean, bottom line is this. This had all kind of attention placed on it. The Obama administration could not afford a self-repeal, could not afford people getting against this law that were previously for this law, could not afford to end up seeing this being challenged in the ways that it's been challenged over the years, know that it was hyper-partisan in nature in regards to how it was passed, and then have these IT problems. Because I'm going to tell you, folks, and you may agree or disagree with me. Again, you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook. Love to get your feedback on this. But the IT problems are only the tip of the iceberg. IT problems are fixable. IT problems you can, in essence, test for over and over and over and over again. You can basically overload your servers, your programs, your test scripts in a sandbox so that by the time you roll it out into production, you know exactly where the bugs will be. And if you're planning ahead, you will have fixed those bugs before it gets into the production environment. It should have been resolved. This is something that they knew they needed to do since 2010. Once the law was passed, yeah, they knew it was going to be challenged in the Supreme Court. I give you that. But you're not going to sit there and tell me that they sat on their hands until after John Roberts called it a tax and Congress had the right to tax versus calling it a mandate, which Congress doesn't have the right to tell people to buy a product. If you're telling me that they didn't put any IT resources, time, money, talent into building out the IT aspect of healthcare.gov, the IT aspect of the Affordable Care Act, if they waited until John Roberts called this law, this individual mandate, a tax, and not basically prompting Americans to buy a product for the first time in American history, if they waited until last summer to start doing the IT, then they deserve to delay this by a year. In fact, if that's the case, those that are running this deserve to no longer be in positions of power, and this law deserves to be shut down. I don't believe that. I believe that they started looking into the IT specifications. They started looking into the types of talent and resources and manpower necessary to make this work since this law was passed. In fact, one could even argue that they did that since before this law was passed, because remember, they ended up eventually having a supermajority in 2009 in the Senate. They ended up having a huge majority in the House of Representatives, and they had President Obama with all this historical political capital sitting there in the White House starting in January 2009. Therefore, you would have to think, if you're going to ignore focusing on jobs in the economy exclusively for the first year, and you're going to start trying to roll out this health care plan, that you probably thought about what type of technical resources, human resources, planning, know-how, and dare I even say, contingency plans. What types of things need to be in place in order to make this work? And if that's been the case since 2010, and we get to 2013, and we're past the point of John Boehner calling this a tax, and we're past the point of President Obama winning re-election, because truth be told, they knew that even if President Obama lost in 2012, the elections would have to look like 2010 and worse for the Democrats in order to have the law repealed. They couldn't just lose the White House. They had to lose the Senate. So it was going to take a lot for this law to be reversed. So, again, if you know you need to have all these things come into play before this law is going to be repealed, because the Supreme Court may or may not strike it down. But since 2009 even, you were planning the technical aspects of this law, where you're hodgepodging the legislation of the law together. And so you've been doing this, thinking about this from anywhere from 2010, 3 years, to 2009, 4 years. You finally roll it out so that even your skeptics get a chance to put their hands on it. Those critiquing the fact that you shouldn't even be doing this in the first place finally get a chance to say, maybe I was wrong. And your supporters get to say, yeah, in your face, conservatives, I told you this would work. Get into the 21st century. All you do is create a website and have some servers, put your name in there, your information, you get to shop the marketplace, and you get to save money on your health care. And fatal error. For some reason, it won't let me get past this page. And that's what John Boehner has to point out to the president. The IT aspect is just the tip of the iceberg. Because if computers, which you can test with test scripts, you can overload servers, you can put more servers into place, you can test. You can do all these things. And there are plenty of IT corporations that do this on a regular basis throughout America. And they don't do this at this high level of profile. The most prestigious, important, impactful IT rollout in the history of the United States of America. Not just the history of the United States of America. With the resources of the federal government, with the first African-American president, and a bad Republican brand name when it comes to moderate America on the other side of this. You got all these things on your side. All these things on your side. And the IT doesn't work right? The IT fails? What do you think's going to happen when you have federal workers looking at these plans, trying to see if Sally is actually eligible for this, or if Johnny and Peggy Sue are actually eligible for that plan over there with their twins or with their kid going to college? Now, I mean, computers just do what computers do. You give them the horsepower, you give them the program, you make sure the program's tight, and it goes zoom. People are constantly thinking and interpreting and calling off sick from work. If you can't get the IT to blend after 3 to 4 years of planning, and this got to be the prove it from Boehner to President Obama. We've already seen the Obama to Boehner prove it. But this got to be the other side of it. If after 3 to 4 years of IT planning and you can't get this to work, I don't even want to see, Mr. President, what the bureaucracy of this is going to look like. Perhaps this is why you delayed the employer mandate. Perhaps this is why you gave out all the exceptions. Perhaps this is why former Speaker Pelosi and Majority Leader Reid made sure that many of their constituents had exceptions. Maybe this is why the unions have jumped off board. Mr. President, prove it that Obamacare, that the Affordable Care Act is going to work from soup to nuts. Because if you can't prove it, the American people are going to suffer as a consequence. Both sides have interesting cases to make for the other when it comes to prove it. Who do you think is going to be able to prove it the best? Let me know. You know where to find me on Facebook. You know where to find me on Twitter. I always enjoy talking to you. You know I love you. I would talk to you mañana. TCNGB. Take care and God bless. Peace.